Thank you, Helen, for this presentation. 大家好. So I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in English. I'm greatly honored to have been invited by Dr. Zhao Feng to participate in this forum in the city of Hangzhou, known to all as the Paradise on Earth. As a curator of the Dunhuang collection kept at the French National Library, I have the privilege of dealing on a daily basis with the Dunhuang manuscripts, which were brought back to France by the French scholar Paul Pelliot after the completion of his archaeological expedition in Central Asia from 1906 to 1908. So even if I do not work in a museum but in a library, Silk Road artifacts have been my daily companions for 3 decades. And I have made a few exhibitions of Dunhuang documents in Paris. And by the way, this is probably the only sketch of Dunhuang that we have. In 1910, the Dunhuang collection was divided between 2 institutions. Most paintings were sent to the Louvre and are now in the Musée Guimet, which is the main museum of Asian art in Paris. The manuscripts were deposited at the French National Library, or to say it in a more textile-oriented way, all the paintings on silk and hemp went to the Guimet Museum, while all the writings, sketches, and drawings on paper, like the one you've just seen, remained at the library. I had the opportunity to participate in the project of textiles from Dunhuang in French collections that Dr. Zhao Feng conducted in Paris, because some Dunhuang manuscripts have unique textile editions. I will show a few examples kept at the library. This very small book is covered with plain woven blue silk. And this book resembles the book format that is familiar to us, the codex. But up to the Song Dynasty, a book usually looked like this. An average scroll measured from less than 1 meter to more than 50 meters. A wooden stick, like the one you see on the slide, was attached at the beginning of the scroll to facilitate the rolling. The scrolls were then secured by tying a ribbon around them. And there are a few ribbons. Not all the scrolls have ribbons, but a few have kept their original ribbons, like this one, which was woven in the technique of Kosa tapestry. And some Tibetan books also use textiles to make covers. This is a plain weave silk sutra cover showing a clamp-resist dyed floral pattern. The French National Library also keeps several silk scrolls from the 5th century. The ink on the silk still looks fresh and shiny. From this example, it is obvious that paper scrolls imitated the silk scrolls format and yellow color. And here, the characters of Buddhist scripture were not copied with brush and ink, but embroidered on a piece of light blue silk in the 7th or 8th century. Since 2004, a complete digitized catalog and an image database of the Pelliot collection are available online on the French National Library website. With free access, you can download for free thousands of documents that improve our understanding of the Silk Road. The cave full of manuscripts discovered at Mogaoku revealed that Dunhuang, for at least 1,000 years, was at the crossroads of many cultures. In fact, Dunhuang could be called a regional Tower of Babel. And people of different origins lived together and exchanged goods, ideas, and adopted different religions. You could encounter people like these, or like those. You see merchants on the right and soldiers on the left. There was also a large community of Chinese civil servants, and of course, a large Chinese population. And there was also a great number of Buddhist monks. Some were pilgrims traveling over long distances with scrolls in their backpack. And from the Chinese point of view, some men looked very strange with full beards and very long noses. All those people spoke different languages written in their own strange scripts. Among the manuscripts that were discovered, some are written in the long-forgotten languages spoken in Kucha, or spoken by the Sogdians, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans, etc. And even texts in languages not spoken at Dunhuang were found, such as Sanskrit and Hebrew. There is no doubt that the Silk Road was a region where all kinds of exchanges took place and where various communities came in close contact. But the great majority of Dunhuang documents that were found in the cave are in Chinese. And this is why in the exhibitions I have curated, I've usually favored pieces that particularly highlighted some aspects of Chinese culture. Even in faraway places like Dunhuang, Chinese culture was very well represented. Dunhuang Cave 17 is considered to be a time capsule. I think that it was also a unique Chinese culture capsule, because nowhere else have we found so many original manuscripts that complement the history of medieval China. This is especially true in my own field, which is the history of the Chinese book. But it's also true for fields like Chinese Buddhism, Chinese medicine, and so much more. So in my slides, I show some of the most spectacular Chinese documents from the Paleo collections that I have used in various exhibitions. So my first experience in organizing a Dunhuang exhibition was in 1992. I must say that my first encounter of Dunhuang documents was rather odd, since the exhibition focused on the Chinese art of printing, and it showcased only printed material. Although the overwhelming majority of about 40,000 paper scrolls discovered at Dunhuang were handwritten copies, a few hundred printed items were also discovered, and they count as the earliest prints known to us and are invaluable specimens to understanding the early development of printing. Okay, here is not a piece from Dunhuang, but from Kucha that was discovered by Paul Pelliot. And so printing was made by carving wood blocks. This small wood block served as a matrix to print multiple copies of what we call 1,000 Buddha scrolls. And here is an example printed in red. And this is the longest scroll of the collection with more than 2,000 individually printed small images. And the narrow sheets of paper of this Diamond Sutra, printed in 950, has been, the sheets have been folded to look like a small booklet. But we also, and I've also exhibited bigger prints showing a Buddhist image with text and this kind of images were produced in large quantities. And this one is from probably the first half of the 10th century. And it's what's very particular about it. It was mounted on a blue decorated paper that resembles some dyed textiles. So as all Chinese know, one technique to reproduce text or images is to press and ink a large piece of paper over characters or images engraved on stones and to ink the paper afterwards. So one of the most celebrated of these rubbings from Dunhuang is a text composed and written by the brush of Emperor Tang Taizong 1 year before his death in 648. And we know that Tang Taizong enjoyed calligraphy very much. He composed this Wenquanming to celebrate a hot spring in his palace. The original carved stone no longer exists, and this is the only known rubbing. The handwritten date of 653, added at the end, makes it the oldest rubbing in the world. As is evidenced in the lower margin, rubbings already served as models to practice calligraphy. So, designing an exhibition is an arduous exercise. One must not only master the subject from an intellectual point of view, but is confronted to the physical reality of the objects. And of course, each piece must attract the eye. This is especially important when the culture exhibited is not familiar to the visitors, like in Paris. It is even more problematic if you only show manuscripts, that is only textual material, to people who do not understand a single word of the language. And this is a challenge I've had to face many times. To celebrate the opening of the new building of the French National Library, that you've seen on the second slide, a huge exhibition was presented under the title All the Knowledge of the World. I chose to introduce the long tradition of Chinese encyclopedias, which belong to the Chinese category called Lei Shu, and selected some Dunhuang manuscripts. Some rare or unique fragments of Chinese encyclopedias have survived in Dunhuang, such as the Leilin that you see here. The National Library takes part in official events. When the year celebrating China in France was announced several years ago, I was asked to organize a major exhibition on the Chinese treasures kept at the library. Once again, the Dunhuang collection served to highlight many aspects of the Chinese culture. And I've always been an admirer of Chinese calligraphy. And I entitled this exhibit Chine, l'Empire du Trait, which could approximately be translated as China, the Empire of the Brushstroke. And part of this exhibition was devoted to early specimens of calligraphy by Buddhist monks. Here is an example. And this is one of among the earliest scrolls copied at Dunhuang. It dates from 514 in the Beiwei. For precious offerings, gold ink was sometimes preferred to black ink, as exemplified by this early copy of the Lotus Sutra. And the effect of gold ink against an indigo-dyed paper is stunning. And of course, it was impossible to talk about calligraphy without mentioning the most celebrated calligrapher, Wang Xizhi, of the 4th century. A fragment of about 20 characters written on a pale blue paper reproduces a letter of the master that was later included in the Shiqijie. This faithful copy may have been executed at Chang'an during Tang Taizong's reign. That people living on the Silk Road enjoyed Chinese calligraphy can again be surmised by the scroll of the Qianziwen, 1,000-character essay, dated 641. The text copied Zhiyong's model. Two calligraphic styles alternate, obviously again to serve for calligraphic exercises. Another calligraphic model is the 11-meter-long rubbing of the Jinggangjing that preserves the calligraphy of the famous master Liu Gongquan. And this fragment is of a calligraphic style that disappeared after the 12th century. On this amazing scroll, the Heart Sutra, Xinjing, takes the shape of a Buddhist stupa. The text acquires a deeper religious meaning because of this special layout. Although Dunhuang was an important Buddhist center, Confucian education was also provided, as shown by copies written by students. The Classic of Changes, I Ching or Zhuyi, was held as the foremost text in the curriculum of traditional education. This scroll is part of the Zhuyi Jingjian Shiwen by Lu Deming. And among other classical texts, there was a unique copy of the Luyu with the Analects, with the commentaries now lost of the famous 2nd century scholar Zheng Xuan. And this copy was made in Dunhuang in 890. People at Dunhuang enjoyed tongue poetry. The poems composed by Bai Jui were extremely popular in central China and circulated even to faraway places like Dunhuang. This pocket-sized booklet with a selection of Bai Jui's poems is a proof of such a popularity. So, Dunhuang has preserved the largest and finest body of Buddhist paintings of the first millennium. A few paintings, however, were not Buddhist, as shown by this scroll illustrating fabulous animals like dragons and phoenixes. The upper register shows the animals, while the lower register provides a political interpretation that is closely related to the Confucian ideal of government. So this forum focuses on the Silk Road, which was a broad axis where people and goods from many cultures circulated. I hope my emphasis on indigenous Chinese culture will not be interpreted as showing a narrow Sino-centric view of that region. The documents that I have briefly presented testify that the culture from central China was also thriving on the Silk Road, at least in places like Dunhuang, and that Silk Road artifacts can contribute to a better understanding of ancient Chinese culture. Thank you for your attention. 谢谢大家。